I'm Lisa Aziz. Good morning. So Boris Johnson has just delivered his final speech as Prime Minister from outside Number 10. He urged the Conservatives to unite behind his successor, Liz Truss, and said his successor will do everything to get people through the current energy crisis. Mr Johnson will now travel to Balmoral in Aberdeenshire to tender his resignation formally to the Queen. Afterwards, Her Majesty will appoint Liz Truss as the new UK Prime Minister. Well, joining me now, I'm delighted to say, Richard Thomson, the SNP MP for Gordon. Richard, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Lisa.
I'm sure you saw it, but let's talk firstly, if we may, about the outgoing PM's final address to the nation. Certainly he listed, didn't he, a bit of everything tackled in his rather volatile premiership, mentions of the coronavirus vaccine programme, support for Ukraine, and insistence very much that the Tory party can now put aside its differences, the politics, as he put it, in order to deliver for the nation. What did you make of it?
Well, I think in some respects it was classic Boris Johnson that we've all come to know and form strong opinions on. I mean, it was a speech that was it was kind of broke with convention in terms of the sort of measured reflection and personal observations you might have had about a premiership, but it was jam-packed full of shouty alliteration, the kind of Sten gun rattle of contestable claims, but not a single breath of contrition from the man himself for any errors that he might have made politically or personally, or the shortcomings that were exposed in office. And I think it's almost in some ways a perfect endpoint to a rather remarkable premiership that was remarkable for all the wrong reasons and will be viewed with increasing confusion in the rearview mirror of history.
Well, following that 1,000-mile round trip to Balmoral in Aberdeenshire later, of course, we've got Liz Truss's leadership coming in as new PM with a whole new top team and administration. Give us a sense then, if you would, Richard Thomson, of how her victory in the Tory leadership contest has gone down north of the border, given her thoughts, especially on Nicola Sturgeon, are pretty well known, aren't they?
Well, yes, and I think it was actually Nicola Sturgeon who hit the nail on the head yesterday, obviously giving her congratulations to Liz Truss as the Prime Minister designate. It's all political differences aside, that's a remarkable achievement for Liz Truss. But as Nicola Sturgeon said, that if Liz Truss seeks to govern in the manner in which she campaigned for and won the Conservative Party leadership, it's just going to be an absolute disaster for her and for the country at large. I mean, there was an awful lot of pandering to the crowds, the pandering to the Tory activists who turned up to that, but life is more complicated than that, and across a range of issues there are many challenges that she's going to require the goodwill of more than just her die-hard loyalists, but also there are very, very poor relationships at the moment between the government in London and the government in Edinburgh. Cardiff, if there was one in Belfast, I'm sure there would be poor relations there as well, poorer relations than we need at this moment in time with colleagues in Dublin and in the European Union and even Washington. So after the tumult of the last few years and after a botched Brexit process, she's in need of building an awful lot of goodwill, and as Nicola Sturgeon said, if she goes about that premiership in the first few months in the way that she went about the leadership campaign, I think she'll find herself bereft of that goodwill and in exactly the same state politically, externally and internally as Mr Johnson latterly began to find himself.
Indeed, and like her predecessor, she's clearly against IndyRef 2 as well, isn't she? So do you fear then the relationship is likely to get frostier even and not even get a chance to thaw?
I think there comes a point where it's no longer just about a politician having a perfectly legitimate view that they don't want Scotland to be independent. I mean, that's obviously, perfectly fair. But I think it takes on a different order of magnitude if you're actively trying to stand in the way of a legitimate democratic choice being made, particularly when that's a majority view of the people of Scotland that a vote should take place, irrespective as to how they'd vote in that, and also the majority view of the membership of the Scottish Parliament. But look, currently that matter is before the Supreme Court for consideration as to whether or not the Scottish Government has the powers. So, in a sense, what the Prime Minister thinks about that at this point in time doesn't matter, because there is a court that's about to determine exactly where the balance of powers lies with respect to the Scotland Act and the wider unwritten constitution. But fundamentally, this is a political issue that isn't going to go away, and one way or another, the premiership of Liz Truss, or whoever follows her, is going to have to get to grips with the desire of increasing numbers of people in Scotland, not just to have the vote, but also to establish a Scottish state and rejoin the European Union.
Just for the benefit of any listeners coming our way just now, his statement was, "We are one whole and entire United Kingdom," making the case for the union. He added he believes the union is so strong that those who want to break it up will keep trying, but they will never, ever succeed. That was the quote from him in the past 20 minutes or so. Now, let's also talk, if we may, Richard Thomson, about First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. Now, we gather she's set to publish her plans for the next year in the programme for government there later on. So what can the people and businesses of Scotland then expect from that to help through this cost of living crisis?
I think we can expect, as you say, measures to tackle the cost of living crisis. The Scottish Government has some welfare powers as a result of further devolution that's taken place. So I would expect to see reiterations of what's happening with that. The Scottish Child Payment that has been brought in, it's been regarded as a game changer by a number of stakeholders in social policy, and obviously by those who receive it. So I think we can expect to see confirmation that, notwithstanding budget pressures, that is plans to double that will go ahead. So I would expect to see measures in terms of the Scottish Government's responsibility and spend to try and take the edge as far as possible off the cost of living crisis that we're now in the midst of. But I think we can also expect an honest appraisal of where we are and what the limitations of any Scottish Government programme is going to be, because fundamentally the inflation that we're seeing in the economy, the real pressures about cost of living are being driven by two things: Brexit to a large extent, but most of all at this point in time by high energy prices. So I think it's inevitable that whatever measures are announced in the Scottish Parliament this week, we're still going to have to sadly look back to London to see what's going to happen in terms of dealing with regulating and mitigating the pressures that there are in the energy market, because that's what's driving the increasing cost of everything right now.
Richard Thomson, SNP MP for Gordon, thank you very much indeed for joining us live here on LBC News.